Dalton Keene thought he was getting an empty cabin, but when he opened the creaky old door, a pair of surprised green eyes looked right at him from across the room. In just 30 seconds, all his plans for a new start would fall apart. The morning sun made long shadows through the pine trees as Dalton drove his wagon up the twisty path to what he hoped was his new beginning. He'd spent his last bit of money on this faraway cabin, buying it without even seeing it, from a guy in town who really needed cash fast. The paper proving he owned it was tucked in his vest pocket, making him the legal owner of this lonely spot in the wilderness. After losing his ranch to people he owed money to 3 months back, this cabin was his only shot to start over. His rough hands held the reins tighter as he got closer to the little wooden building. Smoke was coming out of the chimney. Dalton's heart dropped. Someone was using his firewood, living in his cabin, acting like it was theirs. He'd spent every penny he had on this place. Now he'd have to fight for what was his. Getting off the wagon, Dalton stood tall and walked to the front door. The wood was old but strong. Through the one window, he saw someone moving inside. His jaw tightened. Whoever was staying here without permission would soon find out he wasn't someone to mess with. He'd worked too hard and lost too much to let anyone take what little he had left. Without knocking, Dalton pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cabin was neat, taken care of, with little girly touches that caught him off guard. Wildflowers were in a jar on the table, and the smell of fresh bread was everywhere. But what really stopped him was the young woman by the fireplace, her long reddish hair glowing in the morning light. She turned slowly, and their eyes locked. She was so pretty she could make guys forget their own names. But her green eyes had a tough look that said she wasn't scared easily. She wore a plain blue dress that looked worn out, but she stood with a quiet strength, even though she was clearly in a place that wasn't hers. "You must be the new owner," she said, her voice calm even though she looked a bit surprised. "I've been waiting for you." Dalton took off his hat, not sure why he felt like he should be polite to someone who was basically trespassing. "Ma'am, I'm Dalton Keene. I bought this cabin, and I've got the papers to prove it." She nodded, slowly, like she'd heard that before. "I'm Cora Lane, and before you tell me to leave," she paused, looking right at him. "You should know I can't." The way she said it, so sure, gave Dalton a funny feeling. This wasn't just someone sneaking a place to stay. This was something bigger, something that told him his troubles were just starting. But Dalton didn't know yet why a woman like Cora would live all alone out here, or what she was hiding that made leaving impossible. Dalton put his hat on the table, trying to keep his voice steady, even though he was getting mad. "Miss Lane, I don't care what deal you had with the guy who owned this before. I've got legal papers, and this is my place now." Cora stepped away from the fireplace, her hands together in front of her. "I get where you're coming from, Mr. Keene, but there's stuff about this place you don't know yet. Stuff that changes everything. The only thing that matters is I paid for this cabin with money I couldn't afford to lose." Dalton pulled the ownership paper from his vest and put it on the table between them. "Whatever sad story you're about to tell, I've heard worse. I've lost more." Something flashed in Cora's eyes. Not fear, but maybe she felt sorry for him. "I'm sure you have, that this isn't about money or papers. This is about staying alive." Dalton looked at her face, trying to see if she was lying. She didn't look like the drifters or tricksters he'd met in town. Her clothes were clean, her hair neatly braided, and the cabin looked well cared for. Someone had been looking after this place, not just crashing here. "Whose life are we talking about?" he asked, his voice softer now, even though he didn't mean it to be. Before Cora could answer, a noise outside made them both stop. Horses were coming, and fast. It sounded like a few riders. Cora's face went pale, and she hurried to the window, staying hidden behind the curtain. "How many people knew you were coming here today?" she whispered, her calm gone. "Nobody. I didn't tell anyone about buying this place." Dalton went to the window and saw 3 men on horses coming up the path. They rode like they meant business, not like they were just passing. "Buy? You know those guys?" Cora's hands shook as she held the window frame. "I was hoping they'd never find me here." The guy in front was tall with a black beard, and a gun belt that looked well used. The other two stayed close behind him, like they were following orders. They weren't here for a friendly visit. "Miss Lane," Dalton said quietly. "What are you running from?" She turned to him, and for the first time since he got there, her tough look broke. "My husband, or at least the man who thinks he owns me." Dalton's stomach sank. A married woman hiding from her husband made this a whole new problem. But the fear in her eyes told him this wasn't just a fight between a husband and wife. "He's not the kind of guy who takes no for an answer," Cora said, her voice super quiet. "And he's got money and power most people don't." The horses were getting closer. Dalton found himself stepping in front of Cora to protect her, even though he wasn't sure why. 5 minutes ago, he was ready to kick her out himself. "They're almost here," Cora whispered. But neither of them knew the main rider had been hunting Cora for weeks and wasn't leaving without her. The riders stopped in front of the cabin, their horses huffing from the fast ride. Dalton heard the sound of leather as the men got off. Their horses, their spurs clinking on the porch steps. "Stay behind me," Dalton whispered to Cora, surprised he felt like protecting her. This morning, he wanted her gone, but now things felt different. A loud knock shook the door. "Open up." "We know you're in there, Cora." The voice was the bearded man's, and it sounded like he was used to people doing what he said. Cora's breathing got faster, and Dalton could feel her fear filling the small cabin. "What do you want me to tell them?" Dalton asked quietly. "Nothing," Cora whispered. "Don't let them know you've seen me." But it was too late. The door handle turned, and the 3 men walked in without being invited. The leader's eyes scanned the cabin and found Cora behind Dalton. A cold smile spread across his rough face. "There you are, darling. You've made us chase you for a while." Dalton stepped forward, blocking the man's way to Cora. "This is my property. You're trespassing." The bearded man looked at Dalton, sizing him up like a wolf, checking out its prey. "I'm Marcus Webb. That woman behind you is my wife, and she's coming home with me." "I'm not your wife," Cora said, finding her voice. "That marriage wasn't real. You forced it, and you know it." Marcus' smile stayed, but something scary flashed in his eyes. "The law says you're mine, and out here, the law is what counts." Dalton felt the weight of his gun on his hip. But 3 against 1 wasn't good odds, especially since he didn't fully get what was going on. "The lady says she doesn't want to go with you." "The lady," Marcus said, mocking the word, "doesn't get a choice. She's mine like a horse or a piece of land." The mean way he said it made Dalton's jaw tighten. He'd met guys like Marcus before, guys who thought power let them own people. "Nobody owns anybody," Dalton said. One of Marcus' guys, a skinny man with cold eyes, moved to Dalton's side. "Boss, we could just take her. This guy's outnumbered." But Marcus raised his hand, still watching Dalton. "You seem like a smart guy. Walk away, and nobody gets hurt. This is family business, not yours." Dalton could feel Cora shaking behind him, but she didn't run or beg. Whatever happened with Marcus, she was facing it bravely. "I bought this cabin fair and square," Dalton said. "Miss Lane is my guest. That makes this my business." Marcus' face got darker. "My guest? How long have you known my wife?" "Exactly." The question was heavy, like Marcus was trying to twist things to justify something bad. "Long enough to know she's not going where she doesn't want to," Dalton answered. Marcus nodded slowly, like he'd already made up his mind. "I was hoping we could do this nicely, but you're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." The skinny guy's hand moved closer to his gun, but Marcus had already decided something that would change everything for them. Marcus stepped back and waved to his men. "Burn it down." The words hit Dalton like a punch. "What?" "You heard me," Marcus said, like he was ordering food. "If my wife likes this cabin better than her real home, maybe she needs to see what happens to places that hide runaway wives." The skinny guy grabbed a burning log from the fireplace. Cora gasped behind Dalton, and something broke inside him. This wasn't just about his cabin anymore. This was about doing what's right. "You burn this cabin. You're destroying my life," Dalton said, his hand moving toward his gun. "I put everything I had into this place." Marcus shrugged. "Should have stayed out of it." The third guy, who hadn't talked yet, pulled his gun and aimed it at Dalton's chest. "Boss says step aside. You better listen." Dalton's brain raced. 3 guys with guns, only one of him and a woman to protect. But something Cora said earlier stuck with him. This wasn't just about a bad marriage. This was about survival. "Mr. Keene," Cora said softly, "let me go with them. Don't lose everything for me." But when Dalton looked back at her, he noticed something that made him sure. Cora's hands were on her stomach, and suddenly her loose dress made sense. She wasn't just running from Marcus. She was protecting something way more important. "No," Dalton said firmly, turning to Marcus. "She stays." Marcus saw where Dalton was looking and figured it out. His face turned angry. "You think that baby's yours, stranger?" The accusation was like poison in the air. Dalton realized Marcus was making up a story to justify hurting both of them. "The baby's not his," Cora said, her voice stronger. "And it's not yours either, Marcus. You know that." Marcus' face turned red with anger. "Everything about you is mine, including that baby." The awful way he said it made Dalton decide. He'd lost his ranch, his money, and most of his hope in the last few months. But he wasn't going to lose his heart by letting a pregnant woman get taken by a monster. Dalton grabbed his gun. "She's not going. That's final." The skinny guy with the burning log laughed. 3 guns against 1. "You sure, Cowboy?" Marcus raised his hand again, looking at Dalton with new interest. "Actually, I've got a better idea. Since you want to play hero, let's make this fun." But what Marcus suggested next would test everything Dalton thought he knew about being brave. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Here's the deal, Cowboy. You and me, one-on-one, fair fight with guns. You win, I leave, and never bother Cora." Again, Dalton's heart pounded. A fair fight with Marcus Webb was probably a ticket to the grave, but it was better than facing 3 guys at once. "And if you win?" Dalton asked. "When I win," Marcus corrected, "Cora comes with me, and you get buried outside your cabin." Cora stepped forward, her face pale but strong. "No, I won't let you die for me, Mr. Keene. You don't even know me." But Dalton was thinking about how she held her stomach, the fear in her eyes when Marcus showed up, and the quiet strength she showed in a tough spot. Maybe he didn't know her whole story, but he knew enough. "I know you're carrying a kid. Who doesn't deserve a dad like him?" Dalton said, not looking away from Marcus. Marcus' jaw tightened. "That kid will learn to behave, just like its mom should have." The way Marcus talked about the unborn baby, like it was something to control, not love, made Dalton's blood freeze. He'd seen what guys like Marcus did to kids who couldn't fight back. "You're scared to face me alone," Dalton said, trying to make Marcus mad. "That's why you bring hired guns." Marcus' face got darker, and he told his men to step back. "Clear the porch. This won't take long." As the 2 men went outside, Cora grabbed Dalton's arm. "He's faster than he looks, and he's killed before. I've seen it." Dalton put his hand on hers, surprised how right it felt. "What's the real story, Cora? Why'd you marry him?" Her eyes got teary, but she wouldn't let them fall. "My dad owed Marcus money he couldn't pay. Marcus said he'd erase the debt if I married him. My dad was dying, and I couldn't let him lose everything because of hospital bills." It all made sense now. Cora wasn't just forced into marriage. She gave herself up to save her family. And now she was protecting her unborn kid the only way she could. "The baby's dad?" Dalton asked softly. "A good guy who died before he knew about the baby. Marcus found out I was pregnant and decided the kid would be his heir, whether it wanted him or not." Dalton nodded, getting it all now. This wasn't about land or pride. This was about a woman keeping her kid safe from a monster who thought people were things to own. Marcus' voice came from outside. "Time's up, Cowboy. Let's see what kind of man you are." But as Dalton walked to the door, Cora whispered something that flipped everything he thought he knew. Cora's whisper stopped Dalton in his tracks. "Marcus isn't just my husband. He's the one who killed your brother." Dalton felt like he'd been punched. His brother Samuel was found shot dead on a lonely trail 6 months ago, his horse and stuff stolen. The sheriff said it was random thieves, but they never found who did it. "Samuel Keene was your brother." Cora's voice was so quiet. I heard Marcus bragging to his guys about killing a rancher who wouldn't sell his water rights. He described the man's face, his horse, even the scar on his hand from when he was a kid. Dalton's vision went blurry with anger. Samuel's death was the last straw that made him sell everything and buy this cabin. Marcus didn't just ruin Cora's life. He took Dalton's family. You sure? Dalton's voice was rough. He kept your brother's watch, the one with initials inside. He showed it to me to prove what happens to people who go against him. Dalton stepped outside, his hand steady on his gun even though he was boiling inside. Marcus stood 20 steps away, looking calm and sure while his two guys watched from the porch, excited. Before we do this, Dalton called out, "Tell me about Samuel Keene." Marcus' confident look slipped for a second. Never heard of him. Rancher who wouldn't sell his water rights. Shot on the North Trail 6 months ago. Now Marcus smiled for real, dropping his fake niceness. Oh, that's Samuel Keene. Stubborn guy thought his beliefs were worth more than his life. The words hit Dalton hard, but they also gave him something he'd been missing for months. Truth. This wasn't just about saving Cora anymore. This was about justice for Samuel. He was my brother. Marcus' smile got bigger. Then this is even better than I thought. I get to finish what I started. The two men faced each other in the dusty clearing, hands near their guns. Dalton could hear his heartbeat, but he also heard something else. Samuel's voice from when they were kids, teaching him to shoot straight and stand up for what's right. On 3, Marcus called. 1. Dalton's mind cleared, focusing on the man who killed his brother and scared an innocent woman. 2. Time slowed as both men reached for their guns. 3. Gunshots rang out. Marcus was fast, faster than most guys Dalton had faced. But grief and anger made Dalton's reflexes super sharp. When the dust settled, Marcus Webb was lying still in the dirt, his gun only half out. But as Dalton stood over his brother's killer, Marcus' two guys stepped off the porch, guns already out. The skinny guy aimed at Dalton's chest before he could move. Boss might be dead, but you killed him. That makes you a wanted man. Dalton's gun was empty, and reloading would take too long. The two guys moved closer, enjoying their upper hand. Should have stayed out of it. Cowboy, the other guy said. You're gonna pay for getting involved. But before they could shoot, a rifle shot came from the cabin window. The skinny guy spun and fell, holding his shoulder. Cora stood in the doorway, holding an old rifle like she knew how to use it. The next shot won't miss, she said calmly. The other guy turned toward her, but Dalton used the moment to dive behind Marcus' body and reload. When he came up shooting, the last guy was already running for his horse. Dalton let him go. One guy telling the story might actually help them. Cora lowered the rifle and walked over to Marcus' body. She looked down at the man who controlled her life for months, and Dalton thought she'd look relieved or happy. Instead, she just looked tired. It's over, she said quietly. But Dalton was looking at Marcus' body, and something didn't add up. Cora, you said Marcus kept my brother's watch. She nodded. He always wore it on a chain, like a prize. Dalton knelt and checked Marcus' vest, finding the silver watch that used to be their dad's before Samuel got it. Seeing it brought back tons of memories. Christmas mornings, cattle drives, the proud day Samuel got the watch. But when Dalton opened it, he found something surprising. Inside, with the initials SK their dad carved, was a folded piece of paper. What is it? Cora asked. Dalton unfolded it carefully. It was a map in Samuel's handwriting, showing a spot in the mountains north of here. At the bottom, Samuel wrote, "For my brother Dalton if anything happens to me." Samuel knew Marcus was going to kill him. Dalton realized. He hid this message knowing I'd get the watch back someday. Cora leaned closer to look at the map. What do you think he wanted you to find? Before Dalton could answer, more horses were coming up the trail, fast. The guy who got away must have gone for help, Cora said. But as the riders came out of the trees, Dalton saw something that changed everything. The leader wore a sheriff's badge, with 6 armed deputies behind him. That's Sheriff Morrison, Cora whispered. He's been looking for me since I ran away. Marcus told him I was taken by bandits. Dalton looked at Marcus' body, then at the pregnant woman next to him with a smoking rifle. in about 30 seconds. He'd have to explain to his sheriff why he killed a so-called respectable man and why he was hiding a supposedly kidnapped woman. But the map in his hand hinted Samuel left him more than just a clue about his death. Sheriff Morrison got off his horse slowly, his old face taking in the scene. Marcus' body, the wounded guy crawling to his horse, and Cora with the rifle next to Dalton. "Miss Cora," the sheriff said carefully, "Marcus Webb said you were kidnapped. Said he was putting together a search party." Cora stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "Sheriff Morrison, Marcus Webb forced me to marry him to pay my dad's medical bills. When he found out I was pregnant with another man's baby, he got violent. I ran to keep my baby safe." The sheriff looked at Marcus' body. "And this man, Marcus Webb, killed my brother Samuel 6 months ago," Dalton said, showing the watch. "He kept this as a trophy." Miss Lane heard him bragging about it. Sheriff Morrison looked at the watch, recognizing the initials and scratches Samuel always griped about. "I remember this watch. Samuel never took it off. Marcus also tried to burn down my cabin, which I bought legally, and threatened to kill Miss Lane and her baby," Dalton went on. "I challenged him to a fair fight, and he agreed." The wounded guy, now on his horse, yelled, "Sheriff, they killed Mr. Webb for no reason. He was trying to save his wife." But Cora went to her bag in the cabin and came back with some papers. "These are the marriage papers Marcus made my dying dad sign. You'll see the debts and threats in Marcus' handwriting." Sheriff Morrison looked at the papers, his face getting serious. "These aren't real marriage papers. These are blackmail papers." The wounded guy saw his story falling apart and rode off toward the trees, but 2 deputies were already chasing him. "The real question," Sheriff Morrison said, "is what happens now." Dalton showed him Samuel's map. "My brother left this before he died. It shows where he hid proof of Marcus' crimes, stolen water rights, killed ranchers, blackmailed families." Samuel was investigating Marcus, the sheriff asked. "For months, it seems. He knew Marcus would kill him, so he wrote it all down and hid it where only I'd look." 3 days later, following Samuel's map, they found a pile of papers in a cave north of the cabin, showing all of Marcus Webb's crimes. It pointed to some crooked officials and helped get back stolen stuff worth thousands. Cora's marriage to Marcus was ruled not real by the court. The same court gave her money from Marcus' stuff, enough to make sure her kid would always be okay. 6 months later, Dalton stood on the porch of his fixed-up cabin, watching Cora hang laundry in the morning sun. Her pregnancy was obvious now, and she moved carefully, like she was carrying something super precious. She looked up and saw him watching. "The baby kicked for the first time today," she said. Dalton smiled, still shocked at how much his life had changed. He'd bought this cabin thinking he'd live alone, dealing with his sadness and starting from nothing. Instead, he got justice for Samuel, saved a good woman, and learned sometimes the best things come when you least expect them. "Have you picked a name?" he asked. Cora's hand rested on her belly. "Samuel, if it's a boy, for the man who made this all possible." Dalton nodded, thinking his brother would have liked that. Samuel always said good people find each other when they need to, most. Looking at Cora now, safe, free, and ready to bring a new life into the world, Dalton knew his brother was right about more than just Marcus Webb's crimes. Some things you buy, he thought, turn out to be worth way more than you ever dreamed.